Good morning, everybody. Gershon Ben Keren is a 5th degree black belt in Krav Maga, the fighting system of the IDF, and is a professional security consultant with over 20 years working as both an operative and as a trainer. His book, Krav Maga Tactical Survival, presents as many non-physical solutions to violence as physical ones and describes in detail how and when to de-escalate potentially violent situations, recognizing the warning signs of an attack and how to shut it down before it happens. In this talk, you'll learn the psychology of violence and how to effectively communicate with angry and aggressive people in order to resolve conflicts and disputes before they turn physical, skills that he has learned and employed over his 20-year career dealing with aggressive and violent individuals. Please let me introduce Gershon Ben Keren.
Thank you. I always try and like to start these things by taking something from real life and bringing it to you to make it relevant. So in 2015, July, there were two women walking back from a club in South Boston about 1 a.m. in the morning. And they were jumped by two guys. One had an imitation pistol, and it was a basic mugging scenario. They screamed, they shouted. They were fortunate that there was an off-duty cop nearby who came and broke it up. And the two guys ran off, escaped, got into a white car that was waiting for them. Boom. The women, or one of them, wrote a letter to Fox News. And it's really good to get experiences from people who've been in real life situations and see what they did right, what they did wrong. This isn't to blame anybody, but so that we can have some takeaways to see how we can improve our survival chances. And one of the lines that was in the letter was that she wrote, although we'd both taken self-defense courses before and they were useful, everything happened so fast that we didn't have time to do anything. And I could take that as a self-defense instructor and be insulted by it and say, well, hang on a minute, why didn't you get your self-defense to work? But I actually agree with them. And I don't believe that self-defense as self-defense works. And this is something I've experienced over 20 years personally, from my own experiences, talking to other security personnel, and watching violence unfold. Self-defense or physical self-defense as a standalone simply doesn't work. If I was to be standing here talking to you and suddenly somebody ran out from the curtains, tackled me from behind, and took me to the ground, I would have a lot of catching up to do. I'd be a long way behind the curve. This person had the initiative. They're the one that's putting a plan into action. However, if I had a level of awareness to me that I heard movement behind me and I turned to face, now I stand a better chance of getting my self-defense to work. And that piece, that awareness piece, the knowledge and the skills to identify and predict violence before it occurs, we refer to as the self-protection piece. And without that self-protection piece, self-defense really falls flat. And I think everybody knows that. Inherently, we kind of know it, which is why a lot of people have a lot of doubts about learning self-defense, because they really don't believe that it's going to work. And one of the things we've tried to do in both books, and I always say we because it's a collective effort, I may write it, but I have a team of instructors who we discuss, debate, and work out the choreography of the photographs, etc. We try and put violence into context. So rather than just say, here's a technique, we really talk about solutions. Because techniques on their own fail. But as part of a solution, we can make them work. So part of what I want to discuss and present today is to give you an understanding of how certain violent situations evolve, get created, how you can identify them, and what non-physical things you can do to possibly avoid them, or at the very least, get your self-defense techniques to work or improve their chances. And that's that self-protection piece. So I know some of you have scanned through the book. I know it's the first book. But you'll probably have seen that we shot the photographs in the locations where assaults are likely to take place. So in bars, around ATMs, restaurants, parking lots, all of those places where we can give a context and where we can talk about how a violent situation actually develops and evolves and how you can pick out warning signs in that situation. And we do exactly the same in the second book. So a large part of our effectiveness comes from putting violence in context, helping people understand how violent situations develop so that they can spot those warning signs, hopefully walk away, if not, in certain situations, de-escalate, resolve the conflict. And in other situations, if they need a physical solution, at least they've had time to put some level of preparation into place to get those physical techniques to work as part of the overall solution. One of the simple things that I always see lacking in a lot of self-defense instructionals when I watch on YouTube and in videos is a key piece that seems to get forgotten all the time, which is disengagement. So even after you've done something, you've got to disengage. And often we get blinded by we need to learn the technique and forget that possibly using a technique to escape a hold or get out of a situation, we need to put a disengagement piece in and go. Because it's only when we're out of that situation that the violent incident actually ends. So what I'm going to talk about a lot today is de-escalation and disengagement. I'm a big believer in creating decision trees because one of the things which is really hard for us to do when we're under the stress and duress of a violent situation dealing with an aggressive individual is actually deciding what to do. Should we walk away? Should we talk? Should we get physical? And most people get caught in what we call a deliberation loop of trying to decide what the best solution is. So what I'm going to do now is go through a kind of top-down decision tree of understanding violent situations so that you almost have a pre-built set of responses based on an aggressor's actions and behaviors towards you. There's basically two types of violence that you're going to face. We have what we call premeditated, and we have spontaneous. A premeditated situation would be one such as a mugging, where an aggressor goes out, purchases a weapon, sets themselves up in a location, looks for victims, carries out some form of surveillance on them, watches how they act, behave, moves, or what we call synchronizes their movement to theirs, and then sticks a knife to them and demands a wallet. It's all planned. Yeah? We have spontaneous acts of violence. These would be examples such as cutting somebody off in traffic. And because you've cut them off in traffic, they've spontaneously become aggressive towards you. Accidentally spilling a drink over somebody. That person didn't come to that scene, that situation, with the intent of becoming aggressive and violent, but your actions and behaviors have caused them to do so. And they might not be real. It could be the perception. Maybe it wasn't you that spilt the drink over them. Maybe it was somebody else that forced you to cut them off in traffic. But the perception is that your actions and behaviors have caused them to become aggressive towards you. In premeditated situations, we have the chance of spotting and identifying the stages and processes that a predatory individual uses. So, for example, if I'm in a crowded area and I catch somebody target glancing, that's somebody who might move to a location, glance at me, move to another location, glance at me. This person has an interest in me. It might be I see them scanning, looking around. So maybe they're checking for exits that they can go down after they commit the crime. Maybe they're looking for the presence of law enforcement, of CCTV cameras. These are things that I can spot, and so I can predict. Spontaneous situations, by their very nature, I can't predict because they just happen. I can be as careful as I want, carrying some drinks back from a bar, and somebody knocks into me. I can't predict that that was going to happen. And there's two big differences between premeditated and spontaneous situations. In premeditated situations, there's an outcome. If somebody wants to mug you, they have an outcome in mind. They want your wallet. They want your mobile phone. In a spontaneous situation, the person doesn't have an outcome in mind. The person that you spill a drink over doesn't really know what's going to make that situation right for them. The person that you cut off in traffic doesn't really know what's going to make the situation right for them. They've just become aggressive towards you because of your actions and behaviors. So when we look at premeditated situations, we have a simple choice. If you're a mugger who wants my wallet, I can hand it over to you, and in probably 99% of situations, you're going to go. If you stay, there's obviously a secondary motive at play, and I probably need to enact a physical solution to deal with it. So I've got a nice, simple decision tree. If you want me, and you want to move me from one location to another, that's a different matter, because now you obviously want to do something to me that you couldn't do in this location. So I have a little decision tree with premeditated situations. Do you want my resources? Do you want me? If you want my resources, I give them to you, you go. If you don't go, I need to enact a physical solution. If you want me rather than my resources, I need to enact a physical solution. Does that make sense to people? But the first question I have to ask is it a premeditated situation or a spontaneous one? And obviously the person involved gives me clues to that. If they stick a knife to me and demand my wallet, there's an outcome, it's premeditated. If I spill a drink over somebody and somebody starts screaming and shouting at me without making an actual demand, then I kind of know it's a spontaneous situation. When we look at the two books in tandem, the first book largely deals with premeditated situations. So it looks at mugging situations, abduction situations. The second book largely looks at spontaneous situations, violence that happens in social settings. So that's a kind of balance of the two books. And what I want to talk about today now is more about those spontaneous situations and what you need to do to try and de-escalate them, resolve the conflict, and be able to walk away. And I'm actually going to explain a process for doing that. So if you're confronted by an aggressor, first question, premeditated or spontaneous? Premeditated, I work down that decision tree. Spontaneous, I'm going to try and help this person find a non-violent outcome. So I'm going to help them define an outcome. At the moment, if I spilt a drink over them, they have nothing in their head that says this is what they want to get out of the situation. And that's why they're becoming aggressive. And if we look at what it takes for somebody to be aggressive, we see a couple of things. The first one, they need to feel justified. They need to feel justified to be aggressive, to be angry towards you. The other thing is, they can't see any alternatives. So they're justified in acting aggressively towards you, and they can't see any alternatives other than acting aggressively towards you. So part of our job in de-escalating a situation and resolving the conflict without it going physical is to help present alternatives to that aggressor so that they can consider a non-violent solution. And often we get confused between de-escalation and conflict resolution. And one has to come before the other. If somebody's in a highly emotional state over having a drink spilt over them, until we can get that emotion down, they won't really be able to see a resolution to the conflict. And we won't be able to, because they're too emotional. And I'm going to kind of draw a little picture here, hopefully, which will explain how people think and act when they become violent. So you'll have to excuse me here. My drawing skills used to be pretty good, and they're even worse now. This is a brain, believe it or not. Yeah? Thank you. And I'm going to explain a theory that a guy, McClellan, put forward in the 60s called triune brain theory. He was an evolutionary psychologist, and he was trying to explain kind of how we have come to have the brain that we do. His theory as an evolutionary theory has kind of been dispelled and debunked. But conceptually, his model gives us a good understanding of how different areas of our understanding and emotions control our actions and behaviors, especially when angry. So he put forward the idea that we have a reasoning brain, the brain that we're using now, the brain that helps us understand ideas, concepts, principles, be creative, all of those things. The one that hopefully we're using most of the time. But he also said we have a mammalian or limbic system brain. And at the base, we also have a reptilian brain. So what he was basically putting forward is we have this kind of human reasoning brain, but we also have this animalistic type of brain, which is split into two. Most of the time, we're using our reasoning brain. But as we become more emotional, we start to switch that off, and we start moving to the limbic brain. And when we're highly emotional, we start using that reptilian brain. Have you ever told an angry person to calm down? Has it ever worked? No. And I'll explain why. When somebody uses their limbic brain, and it's good to think of the limbic brain as a dog brain, yeah? Dogs are social creatures, and they resolve conflict in a number of ways, other than fighting. Dogs in a pack will rarely fight. Same in a wolf pack. Because the wolf pack survival relies on every one of the dogs being healthy and able to hunt. So they have different ways of resolving conflict within the pecking order. And two of the ways they do it is through posturing, well, it gets a bit messy, and submission. So when dogs have a conflict in a pack, there'll be some growling, there'll be some snarling, they'll raise the hackles, the tails will come up, and then one will normally go down, roll on its back, show its throat, conflict resolved. When you tell somebody to calm down, and they're using their limbic system brain because they've become emotional, you're posturing to them. You're telling them what to do. Calm down. You're giving them an order. And if you've told somebody to calm down, you were probably met with a response, I am calm, because that person's posturing back to you. And you can say it as nicely and as pleasantly, and as pleading as you want, but that instruction is taken as an act of posturing. Yeah? Please be quiet. Don't shout. These are all instructions. They're all acts of posturing, which are basically just going to elevate the situation and escalate it rather than de-escalate it. Now, if the person is highly emotive and they're working with the reptilian brain, they're going to interpret as either fight or flight. We all heard of fight or flight responses. So if you tell somebody who's working off that reptilian brain, yeah, they bypass the limbic system brain, they're highly emotional, they're really angry, and you tell them to calm down, that's fighting talk. So what we have to do is get the person back to using their reasoning brain. Because if we're dealing with a reasonable person, well, we know that reasonable people aren't going to attack us, aren't going to become violent. So when we look at what de-escalation actually is, we're trying to move the person from working with the reptilian or limbic system brain back up to working with their reasoning brain. Because if their reasoning brain is functioning, they can start to consider alternatives. When they're highly emotional and the reasoning brain is switched off and they're working primarily with their limbic system or reptilian brain, they're not thinking about alternatives. They're working off emotional justification. And part of what we also have to do, and I'll explain about that, is take away that justification. So the person doesn't have a justification to become violent towards us. And this is how we can resolve a conflict without it going physical, which really should be our end game. Sometimes when I'm interviewed, people will say, well, yeah, I know that's all right for everybody else, but you'd do it differently, wouldn't you? You'd get physical. And it's like, no, I wouldn't. If I can walk away from a situation, if I can de-escalate a situation, that's the way I'm going. 3 assumptions I make about anyone I'm dealing with: they're armed, even if I can't see a weapon. They're assisted. There are people in the environment who can come to their aid. And they're able. They're able to deal with whatever physical solution I put in place. So if I know how to punch, they know how to block. So when I look at that, I want to walk away from every situation just like everybody else, because I'm no Superman. I don't want to be in a situation dealing with armed multiple assailants who are competent at what they're doing. I want to de-escalate. I want to walk away as well. And the easiest way to get somebody back to using their reasoning brain is to ask questions. Open-ended questions, and they need to be open-ended. So a good open-ended question that I've used a lot in my time working security: what can I do to sort this out? I don't say sorry, and this is sometimes where people make a mistake in de-escalating. Because remember, I don't want to give the person justification. And if I say sorry, I'm automatically justifying the fact that they have a right to be angry and aggressive with me. So one of the common mistakes I see in de-escalation is people apologizing. Now, when I say, what can I do to sort this out, there's kind of an implicit apology there, but not an explicit one. So I'm not giving the person justification by saying I'm sorry, but I'm letting them know that I'm kind of responsible here, not necessarily for what happened, but for what is going to happen. And often a lot of emotional people, when they're aggressive, are almost dying to have a lifeline thrown to them. A lot of people don't want to fight, but they feel that they have to. So if somebody can throw a lifeline to them and take responsibility away from them to deal with the situation, a lot of people are happy to take that. I've seen that a lot working door and bar security. So not everybody who becomes spontaneously aggressive towards you wants to move towards violence, but they kind of feel compelled that they have to, especially if they're in a group and there's a social setting. So I'm going to say, what can I do to sort this out? And in doing that, I'm letting the person choose a solution. So they're having to think, well, what would sort this situation out? Maybe if I spilt a drink over them, well, you can buy me another drink. Okay, the person's now thinking about non-violent alternatives that will resolve this situation. And it's a huge difference between them saying, well, you can buy me another drink, and me saying, when I spill a drink over somebody, I'll buy you another drink. Because for them, that will be taken as an act of posturing. Because I'm telling them, this is what's going to resolve the conflict. I'll buy you a drink, that's an end to it. Whereas if they say to me, you can buy me another drink, I'm allowing them to posture to me. And violence is largely ritualistic. If you look at animals fight, it's very ritualistic. Human beings are the same. So if I allow this person to posture to me and say, you can buy me another drink, and I say, that's okay, well, let's sort the situation out, I'm playing that submissive role. I'm the equivalent of the dog lying down, rolling onto its back, showing its throat. And one of the things when we look at social violence, posturing, submission, posturing will recognize submission. Yeah, somebody who's posturing will recognize submissive behavior. If they're fight-flight mode in reptilian brain, that's probably not going to work. So we have to work out, are they working with the limbic system brain? Are they working with the reptilian brain? And people will talk a lot about warning signs. How do you identify, how do you spot when somebody's actually going to be physically violent towards you? And there's so much research done in this area. There's so many people who've worked in security will tell you all about the physical cues, that they'll jut the chin forward, they'll bring the arms back, their color will change. And these things are all true. But I challenge anyone in a state of stress and duress to pick up on these things. They're small, subtle cues. They exist. A good example I was always told when I first started working door was, yeah, the blood will drain away from their face towards the larger muscle groups. That does happen. But if you're in low lighting in a club or a bar, I challenge anyone to spot that change take place. And also you have to have a point of reference. Were you looking at the complexion before they became angry? So although, again, these things happen, they're not really good warning signs. However, there are 3 really good warning signs that tell us when somebody is becoming motivated towards physical violence. And this is one of the reasons why I ask the question, what can I do to sort this out? Because I'm going to judge where the person is emotionally on their response to that question. So there are 3 warning signs, and these are based on my experiences and others, which really tell you when somebody's getting ready, as it were, to throw that punch, make that grab. First one, silence. If you are met with silence when you say to somebody, what can I do to sort this out? What it means is their ability to verbally process has gone. And when somebody is moving towards physical violence, certain things switch off. And one of those is the ability to verbally communicate. Because if you're going to fight, you don't need verbal communication skills. So basically the brain will clear that to create bandwidth, yeah, to pick up reaction, to increase reaction time, to pick up on physical cues. So when somebody meets you with silence, be pretty sure that that person is getting ready to swing that punch. One big cue when you look at it physically is when people turn away. And they'll turn away, and then they'll make that strike. So I'll talk again about some of the physical setups when somebody's going to strike, because what you want to do is look at all of these in conjunction. So silence. Garbled words. So when somebody's speech is garbled, they mix up the order of the words. You drink my spill. Heard that a lot. And that's kind of like the one step before silence. The person is not able to form sentences. Their verbal communication skills have started to shut down. They're getting ready to go physical. So when I say, what can I do to sort this out? And the person's mixing the words up or meeting with me silence, I'm pretty sure de-escalation is not going to be successful. And we need to know when de-escalation won't be successful as when it will. The third one is something that we call repetitive looping. When somebody keeps insisting their claim against you, you spill my drink, you spill my drink, you spill my drink. And what the person is doing is they're self-justifying to themselves. Remember that people have to feel justified to use violence. So they're repeating this in their head over and over again, basically to convince themselves that they're justified to go physical. So when I get met with these 3 responses to my question, I know that de-escalation as de-escalation is probably not going to work. That the person's reasoning brain is so far shut off that they're not going to be able to consider any alternatives. You might have noticed as well that as I'm talking about this, my body language moves and shifts. Because I want to prepare myself for that situation where my de-escalation is not going to work. And this is, again, part of what gets my self-defense to work. So if I'm standing nose to somebody with my hands down as they're screaming and shouting in my face, if they want to grab me, punch me, my chances of actually defending that are pretty low. Their action will beat my reaction. Remember what we said about catching up when you're behind the curve? So one of the first things I want to do is step away and control range. So that if that person wants to make a physical assault on me, they have to move forward. Because it's much easier for me to deal with a punch where the person has to move forward than somebody who just has to punch me. I'm putting my hands up and out, so I'm defending this space, and my hands are in the international language for I don't want any trouble. If I was to stand here in a fighting stance, I'm really giving that person a reason why they should attack me, because if they don't, I'm going to attack them. So I'll put my hands out. If it needs to be a little bit more forceful, I can move my hands right out into the international language for stop. So I'll do all of this. Hey, what can I do to sort this out? With this passive motion of my hands. Notice, though, that my body is very upright. So I'm not acting submissive and scared. And what I'm effectively doing here is acting like the alpha dog in a pack. A lot of times people think that the alpha dog gets involved in every little minor dispute. The alpha dog's a little bit beyond that in a wolf pack. The alpha dog will let the other dogs play with its bone. Doesn't care about that. That doesn't affect its standing in the pecking order. If its position is challenged, oh yeah, it'll posture and possibly fight to defend that position. I'm sending mixed signals here. My hands are passive, but my posture is confident. And what I want to do is just from that animalistic signal, put a little bit of doubt into the person's head who I'm dealing with. Maybe I'm not the alpha. But if I stand there as the alpha, giving that impression, and at the same time saying, what can I do to sort this out? Again, there's just enough doubts circulating in my aggressor's mind to wonder who they've actually picked this fight with. And maybe it would be better, because I'm giving you that option to posture to me, to go down that route. The other thing I do when I step back, it's not just a control range, it's to judge the person's response towards me. Do they follow me into that space? And one of the things I've done here is set myself up from a legal perspective to give myself the right to defend myself. So a lot of people, when they think about an assault, they think it's got to involve somebody grabbing you, somebody hitting you. That's battery. Assault is when somebody gives you reason to fear for your safety, so they're shouting, screaming threats at you, and puts themselves in a position where they can cause you harm. So even though here, when he's nose to nose, it's assault, if I step back, I'm also confirming from a legal position, if he follows in, that it's definitely a case of assault. And this gives me the option under the law to preemptively attack. So I don't have to wait for him to throw a punch. And that isn't necessarily what I'm going to do, but I'm in a position now to do it if necessary. So that's what assault is. If he moved into space, pulled his arm back, that's assault and battery. So it's good to know where you stand legally, because one of the things that will happen when you're dealing with an aggressive person is you'll have all these doubts come into your head. Is it legal for me to hit him? What are the police going to say? What's his attorney going to say if it goes to court? And all these doubts will cause you to hesitate. So what I like to do, just as I'm saying, what can I do to sort this out? I'm judging from what I say what his response is. Do I get a reasonable response? You can buy me another drink, you can pay for dry cleaning. Do I get silence? Do I get garbled words? Do I get repetitive looping? His responses are basically determining what my next move is. So I've stepped back here. So let's say he follows me in and he starts shouting. I still have one last chance to try a non-physical solution. One last chance. It's not a guarantee. Nothing's a guarantee. As Clint Eastwood said in Dirty Harry, if you want a guarantee, buy a toaster. I can kind of help guide, but none of this is a guarantee. So I've got my hands up here. Often I'll talk with them and I'll move them. So if I have to work preemptively, it's not spotted as easily as if it's movement from a static hand. So I'll talk here. And the guy's still in my face, screaming and shouting. And what I'm going to do here is push the hands, not making contact fast towards his face and shout, "Back off!" and move a good way back. There's two fears that we're born with. Yeah, most other fears we learn. If you have a fear of dogs, a fear of snakes, you learned that. You weren't born with it. And most times you're educated by your parents. There's a famous experiment that was done where there was a monkey that had basically been bred domestically in captivity. It had never seen a snake before. And so they introduced into its enclosure snake. And the monkey goes over to it and starts poking it. They then bring a monkey that grew up in the wild and introduce it. And that monkey starts whooping and screaming, explaining, "This is dangerous, this is dangerous." And this domesticated monkey steps back, copies the response. So it's like a learnt fear. They then repeated this with the newly learnt monkey being introduced to another monkey who hadn't seen a snake before. And so the chain goes on, this teaching. Yep. So a lot of the time we're actually learning our fears. But two that we're born with: fast movement, loud noise. And they stimulate our flinch reflex. And what I'm doing here when I push my hands fast towards a person's face is to get them to flinch. I'm reinforcing that with loud noise and instruction. Back off! So what I want to do is get them to flinch. And what this can do, and I'm going to say can do rather than will do, is cause them to undergo an emotional reset. So suddenly they've kind of had the emotion taken away from them. And people, unless they're psychopaths, need to have a certain level of emotion, yeah, to attack you. You see this in the pre-fight rituals. When people are making threats, they're building themselves up. When they're doing their repetitive looping, they're building themselves up emotionally. This is why most altercations, certainly male on male, start with a bit of shoving first. The person's getting themselves ready emotionally to make that large, physically damaging attack. So while this guy's going through all of his rituals, back off. And also, I'm moving away. And if I had more space, I would demonstrate, but I move a good distance away from the person. So they now also have to make a conscious choice about, are they going to continue on with this assault? Because now they've got to get themselves back into an emotional space where they're justified, yeah, and they feel ready. And they've got to make a physical movement across that space to make their attack. And to be honest, if I'm doing that, back off, I'm not really staying to watch the results. Yeah, I'll get that flinch. That's creating me time and distance to make my movement away from them. So when I look at my de-escalation process, what I'm trying to do is get the person to work back using their reasoning brain. Easiest way, open-ended questions. Don't tell them what to do. Don't tell them to calm down. Don't tell them to please be quiet. Yeah? Don't tell them to stop shouting. It's not going to work. It's just going to escalate the situation because they'll take it as you posturing to them. I ask my open-ended question in the hope that they will re-engage with their reasoning brain again, that they'll be able to consider alternatives, and they'll be able to posture to me. So they'll be able to tell me, you can buy me another drink. Great. Well, that's sort the situation out. Yep. Notice I've taken away the justification now. As soon as I agree to their demand, they now no longer have a justifiable reason to assault me. I'm also, by asking them the question, judging, silence, garbled words, repetitive looping. Are they receptive to de-escalation? If that fails, hands come out, loud noise, fast movement, try and stimulate the flinch reflex, get that emotional reset button going. There's certain things you can do as well when your de-escalation process is possibly not going to plan. When I used to work door security, sometimes people would make some very unreasonable claims. So you'd walk over, what can I do to sort this out? And somebody would tell me that I should give them a lifetime membership to the club, they should never have to pay again, drinks should always be on the house, etc., etc., etc. And I'm not in a position to go, yes. So in that situation, I ask more open-ended questions. I'm sorry, I'm not able to do that. I don't have the authority. Is there anything else you can think of that would sort this out for you? Because all I've got to do, pardon me, is keep them thinking of alternatives. And the more they use their reasoning brain, the more they're moving away from their limbic or reptilian. Other tricks I can do. I can sometimes ask them to slow down. I used to do work with collections agencies back in the UK, and you'd get people ringing up on the phone going, "Dear Mr. Jones, you owe us £10,000. What? And the guy would go off on a rant. And one of the things that we found worked very well was asking the person to slow down. Could you please slow down? I'm having trouble understanding exactly what you're saying. Because when people speak very slowly, it's hard for them to say in that emotional space. So there are certain things I can do, and we describe these in the book, how I can kind of reinforce that de-escalation process. But the big one is asking that open-ended question. What can I do to sort this out? Don't apologize. There's an implicit apology in that statement, and you want to move the situation on. Yeah, apology is moving back into the situation. You need to move it on for a solution because violence is extremely fast-moving. Do it with your body language. Appear confident, but also passive. Don't appear like a threat to them. If I do this, maybe he's justified to attack me first. Yeah, because he's in fear for his safety, and I'm in a position where I can attack him. So when we start looking at violent situations, and we have a decision tree, premeditated situations, you want my resources, here they are. Violence avoided. Maybe if you don't go, you move off script, you're not behaving like a mugger anymore. Maybe now I need to deal with you physically. If you want me, that's another matter. I'll deal with you physically. Spontaneous. Start the de-escalation process. When I ask a question, does a person respond presenting alternatives? Great. Continue de-escalation process. They meet me with silence, garbled words, repetitive looping. Back off. Does that work? Yeah. Violence avoided. When we look at violence as a whole, and we consider that kind of understanding of the landscape, we can see that most violent situations don't require a physical solution. We can de-escalate most situations. Most violent situations or potentially violent situations that you're going to face are going to be spontaneous acts of violence. Yeah, disputes over parking spaces. We live in Boston. I know we haven't had bad snow this year. Last year, there was a guy shot over a parking space. Yeah, parked in somebody's space where the guy had cleared the snow. I don't think he just said, "I'll move the car." I'm sure there were words spoken, how that wasn't his space, he wasn't legally entitled. And you know what? The guy might be totally right, but he got shot being right. And most times, when you're dealing with violence, you have a choice. Be effective or be right. Better to be effective. And sometimes that means putting your ego in check. Not arguing whether you spilt the drink or you didn't spill the drink. Yeah? That might not be the best way to go. Just what can I do to sort this out? From there, maybe we can branch out. Maybe you have to buy a drink. But if I'm thinking that this guy's armed, he's assisted, and he's abled, much better solution for me to go down. A guy I do a lot of work with in South Africa, Gabriel Snyder, says there's two reasons why you fight. Ego or survival. And that's a question that you always have to ask yourself. If I'm not going to hand over my wallet to the mugger, is that an ego or survival choice? It's an ego choice. Survival tells me, hand it over. And in 99% of occasions, that person will go. Only when they stay, and it's now a survival situation, do I need to fight. And when you fight for ego, there's a lot of questions in your head. Am I legally entitled, morally entitled to do this? When you're fighting for survival, everything's open. Everything's on the table. And so it's better to have your decision tree direct your physical solutions down to where it constitutes a survival situation rather than one where it's ego-driven. And that can be hard because when you're handing over the wallet, and I've done this, I've been mugged, in your head, you're kind of wanting to go, oh man, yeah, you shouldn't have this. Yeah, I actually now carry 2 wallets, one which has about $20 small business cards and looks quite big, and then a smaller, slim-fitting one. Only in the worst-case scenarios am I going to be found out, maybe where it's multiple muggers who pat me down. But in most situations, the mugger wants that done with as quick as possible. Here you go. So again, I can put things in place which kind of satisfy my ego and make me more likely to act. But that's your question, ego or survival. And when you start putting those situations down, survival situations are actually quite rare. And this is part of what we talk about in both of the books. How to avoid, how to predict, how to identify, how to walk away, how to disengage. And all of our physical solutions are put in those contexts that you don't have a choice, that they're about survival. Does anybody have any questions?
So you've talked a lot about de-escalation and nonviolent solutions, non-physical solutions,
Yep.
when someone's specifically coming at you. Could you comment on, I guess, both the wisdom and techniques or variations on these techniques of choosing to intervene in situations between other people that you think might develop into violence?
So first I'll talk a little bit about the pitfalls and perils of intervening on other people's behalves. I'll give you a personal story. There's myself and another doorman. We'd finished shift. We were walking back to our cars, and we hear bang, bang, bang. So we look across the road, and we see this guy slamming this woman off a glass front of a shop. And we sort of talk and go, we can't really walk by this. We're going to have to intervene. So this is intervening in 2 strangers. And we go over, and the guy's working with taps the man on the shoulder and says, "Excuse me, sir," because it's Britain and we're very polite. And it also kind of is what the police would say, "Excuse me, sir." You know. So the guy turns around and goes, "Oh, thank God you're here." So this is obviously felt very justified to be engaged in this act of violence. When he realized we weren't the police, obviously, you know, we didn't have any real authority. He started to get aggressive towards us. We found out what the situation was, that he'd given his keys to his girlfriend. He wanted to go home. They'd obviously had some row, and she wasn't handing the keys back. So I wouldn't say he was justified to use force, but obviously for him, he felt justified. So we gradually sort of get to the bottom of this, and then suddenly she starts shouting at us, saying, "Leave him alone, leave him alone." So now we're dealing with 2 people who are aggressive towards us, one of whom we've tried to intervene on their behalf. Exactly. And things that will have gone through her head was she was probably thinking what would happen when this situation ended. And this guy, her boyfriend, has been somewhat humiliated, questioned, and possibly made to back down. And obviously that could prompt a further act of violence against her. So, you know, it's understandable. It's kind of like a survival mechanism where, okay, now I'm on your team. We showed those guys, like you said, the common enemy. So there's always a pitfall in intervening that what is a well-meant gesture by you to solve a situation might not be well taken on board by either party in the group. Once we realized that they were team, that's when we walked away. So, you know, again, it's a certain level of de-escalation towards her, calmed down by aggression towards us. So again, there's obviously the pitfall of intervening. Let's say, though, it's a situation where, we might all have been in this situation where you're out for a drink with a friend who's had a few too many, and he started acting a little bit obnoxious towards other people. Maybe somebody's given him reason in his mind to be a little bit aggressive towards them. And now we start to see the situation build. And we start to see where this is possibly going to go. And we want to save our friend. So we want to intervene on their behalf, because at the end of the day, we know that they're not capable of de-escalating in their state, and there's only one way that this is going to go. Or maybe they don't even know how to de-escalate. One of the tricks we used to do is doorman, when somebody had some form of friction over the evening. So let's say, for whatever reason, I'd had to explain to somebody that they couldn't do this, or they were on a warning that if this happens again, they'd be kicked out of the club. When it came time to kick them out, I wouldn't be the person that would kick them out, because we've got that sort of history together. Somebody else would, because it's now a new face for them to interact with. They don't have a history of aggression towards them. And that's kind of what you have to do with this person. So you need to get the attention away from your friend and onto you. And that can sometimes mean physically moving him away. Tricks you can do: make yourself a bit more human. Introduce yourself. Hey, I'm Gershon. I saw what was going on. Yeah, is there any way we can sort this out? So you might have to put yourself in there, introduce yourself. Something somebody's not really expecting if they're acting aggressively. And sometimes these kind of unexpected behaviors, yeah, the person has to use their reasoning mind to work out what's going on. Again, none of it's foolproof. So that's kind of the way I would look in that situation of intervening. Move the attention away from this guy, be the new face in the situation, and then run through the de-escalation process. What can we do to sort this out? Get the guy's reasoning brain working again. Like I say, introducing yourself is one way. It's not expected in aggressive confrontation for somebody to go, "Hi, I'm Dave." Yeah, and that person now is like, why is he introduced? So you're starting to get the whys. Does that help? No. Excellent. Anybody else got anything? Yes.
So over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of focus on the news about confrontations between police and civilians. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about if, this sort of de-escalation is insufficient for that because police maybe can't always walk away, or anything, along those lines.
At the end of the day, if police are telling you to move back, to move away, you kind of have to. And it might be in that situation that your civil rights are being compromised, whatever. You have that choice to be right or to be effective. When somebody in law enforcement puts on their uniform and tells you to do something, they're doing so from a position of authority. They might have overstepped the mark, they might not have overstepped the mark, but they don't have a way to back down from that, because not in that situation, but if we took other situations, if law enforcement would continue backing down, their authority would diminish and nobody would listen to any command that they gave when it was needed. The other thing to understand is when somebody's maybe standing on that line with an aggressive crowd moving towards them, they're undergoing stress and duress. And this is something I think we sometimes forget about law enforcement, that when there's a protester screaming and shouting in their face, their adrenaline's going. And I'm amazed often at how composed law enforcement can be in the face of such aggression. So in terms of in that situation, you have to make a decision. You know, do you feel that your civil rights are being restricted here? Is this a battle that you want to have here and now in the moment with that person who's enforcing the law or their understanding of the law? Or is it one that's better left for another day? Or is there another way that you can draw attention to it? I'm always going to tell everybody, when law enforcement tells you to do something, you do it. As simple as that. Because I don't know, and this is not, I'm trying to think of the best way. I don't know what day this guy's had to get him to here. If he's had to turn up and deal with the death of a child, you know, in a road traffic accident, he's had a series of other high-stress incidents, and now he's here put on that front line, he's going to be in a certain state. And what I don't want to do is provoke that state. So if that guy's telling me to back away, I'll be backing away. I might have to explain to him if I'm being pushed forward by the crowd. Hands come up, hey, I'm trying to comply with your order. Trying to comply. I'm getting pushed. I'm getting pushed. But in terms of the instruction and the order, that guy's there to be obeyed, even if it's wrong. And I know that's a very complicated issue for certain sections of society who might feel that they're being over-policed, might feel that they're being victimized, and they might hear this and go, well, you don't know what it's like to walk in my shoes, and I'm concerned about getting in that car, that cruiser, or getting in the van. I understand all of that. But at the end of the day, my general rule is going to be, if law enforcement are telling me to do something, I'm going to do it. And you'll often see on news clips how those who comply with police when they're physically restrained are treated versus those that fight back. And often it's those that are fighting back that get treated a lot more harshly, because at the end of the day, this person needs to be controlled. If you comply, yeah, you're probably not going to get hurt in the slightest. And I know there are situations in terms of some of the control positions which have been inappropriately used. In Boston, in Massachusetts, with all the police forces I know, all I've ever seen is sensible policing. I don't know if you go to another state, I can't speak for that. Does that make sense? I know it's a complicated one. Thank you.